Good
Hello.
morning. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello. You go first, Davey. I was going to warm up the crowd, but you jumped straight in, so this is your radio.
No worries. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Works with Enfocus Switch webinar. We have a brand new integration, brand new app on our App Store that we want to show you today. And we have here Mark, Sean from Significance, but also Chris that will be moderating this webinar as well. And I'm not going to spoil yet what it is all about. Everybody saw it already in the invitation. It's about S Launch, brand new product, brand new app on the App Store. And you're going to see all about it here today during this webinar. We're just going to give everybody a minute to log in. So bear with us for a minute to leave, to allow other people to log in as well. But Chris, if you want to warm up, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks, Davey. Thanks for that introduction. Thank you as well for having us all on here today. Welcome, everybody. First of all, we've got to test the infrastructure here. As we all know, software can go wrong sometimes. Hopefully not today. If you're on, can you jump in the chat for us? This is a test of intelligence. Can you find the chat first of all? And can you let us know where you are logging in from today? We'd like to know company and country, please. Yeah, so Morton's already actually popped a question in, funny enough, and that's good to see Morton straight on this in terms of interactivity. He's asking, will we be recording the session? We will be recording the session, and we will be sharing it post-session as well. So we've got somebody from Tennessee. We've got our friends from Ottawa in Canada, Denmark. Oh, it's all coming through now. Tim from Rubber Stamp, Ireland, Sweden. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we can safely say the chat is working. So thank you for that, guys. I'm gonna jump right in, Davey. So first of all, we're very lucky and fortunate today to be joined by Davey, who is, as he said, this session's about what works with Switch, and we can't have anything Switch related without the Enfocus App Store Manager. So we're really glad that Davey can join in this conversation and share some of the great achievements that this partnership has seen recently. We have Mark Rad, President of Significance Automation, and Sean Davis, VP of Technology. Gentlemen, do you have any words you'd like to say real quick?
Other than to express our gratitude to be here, and our expression is very sincere. We've really enjoyed our partnership with Enfocus, and it's a marvelous team there. And thank you, Chris. You're doing a fantastic job emceeing this opportunity.
I want to thank me just yet, Mark. Okay, so that's a nice segue onto myself. I have the honor today, and it is truly an honor to be again with Enfocus and looking at their amazing Switch product, and also with Significance as well, who dovetail very well with the Enfocus plethora of software. So I'll be your chair today, and I will generally be nagging you to jump in the chat, which is the next subject that I'd like to bring up. So we really want to hear today things where you may be using Switch, or questions you have about our content, or maybe something that we've missed that you'd like to see afterwards. We've already had requests for recordings, and that's great, and we will be recording today's session and we will be sharing it. But if there's anything else that you want, please jump in the chat and let us know. There's also the question icon in the top right hand corner, where I think a lot of you have jumped straight in and asking the question, and there's also the chat option as well. So long as you put whatever you want to find out in one of those two options, we'll be absolutely fine, and we'll make sure that we can come back to you. The other thing as well, through today's session, we'll be running some polls. Again, we're really keen to hear your thoughts, your needs, your requirements, and that will help steer us for what we do as a businesses going forward and what content we will provide you. Okay, so the running order of today's session. First of all, we're going to give you a little insight into Significance Automation. If you don't know who Significance are, well, you should do by now. They've been around for a while, and I won't steal the thunder, but I'll let Mark do that introduction. Then we'll talk about the developments of the software, why S Launch, and of course, S Launch is why we're here today. That's the partnership, that's the integration with Enfocus Pitstop, the benefits of S Launch. And then we have a truly remarkable case study before we jump into a demo with Sean, who's going to take us through some very intuitive and collaborative workflows. And then we've got the summary and conclusion before we jump into a Q&A, where we really would like to hear your thoughts on the software, the integration, and the partnership. Okay, at this point, I will hand over to the Commander-in-Chief of Significant Automation, Mark Rad. Mark, tell us about the operation.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Well, we founded the company on the basis that there was a lot of software coming into our space, and we wanted to do something different, and that was to remove the complexity of the software and then create higher utilizations out of the software. So we'll move on to the next page. So to give you a little perspective on our team, we're based both in the US, in Canada, and now in Europe. And we've had the privilege of doing the deed for many customers throughout Canada and the US. And then moving on, of course, our perspective on the landscape there is that there is a lot more areas to cover and more adoption of software is coming around. So Chris, if you move over to the next slide, and want to tell you guys a little bit about our company. We have a combined experience of over 300 years. We've become experts in custom automation, integration, communication. Lots of web to print and e-commerce projects are coming in. And then, of course, over the last 5 years, we've gone through a lot of software developments in tandem with our friends at Enfocus. Moving on. So the next slide, Chris. Thank you. Our services include business integration, followed by, I think you should go back a slide, Chris, I'm sorry. Thank you. Custom workflow automation, and then of course the software development services. So in perspective to today's conversation, we're talking about S-Launch. We've just concluded an app development for the App Store. And Chris, maybe you want to move on to the next slide, please. We've just concluded our Pulse app, which we'll be going through very shortly with Sean. But to express that we've been in the business of software development for over 5 years now, and we've had a great stride in that effort, culminating obviously the opportunity around S-Launch, which all has to do with data and managing data. Next slide, please. Excellent. To give everybody some perspective, of course, as I've said, we have a number of apps on the App Store already, and we're continually adding to that repertoire on the App Store. Next slide.
Thanks, Mark.
Excellent. Yeah, and I just want to conclude by saying what we're going to showcase today is an ultra-modern dynamic form builder. It is completely API driven, fully configurable, very mobile enabled, and it's got a trailblazing roadmap that will transcend our industry. So without further ado, Chris, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mark. That's some history you guys have got there, and obviously we can appreciate why you've been working so well with Enfocus, developing those software applications for the last 5 years. I did say it'd be an interactive session, and we're going to dive into our first poll. We're going to ask you, what's your biggest workflow challenge today? And be honest. You know, there's no judgment here, but share what really goes on here. Manual data and errors is the first thing, which is what Mark touched on his previous slide. Okay, they're coming through. We're going to give it a few minutes. Then my able assistant behind the scenes, very, very pretty assistant, will share the poll results. And I will reveal who my assistant was at the end of the webinar. Okay, Davey. Okay, can we see the results, please?
People are still voting.
Got to be quicker off the mark.
That pun?
Coming in.
Yeah, very interesting. Manual data keeps popping up though.
Mm-hmm.
Closely behind, lack of integration between systems, ERP and MIS. Both these companies, Enfocus and Significance, have a plethora of partners that can help you with MIS systems and ERP.
So I'm just gonna and share the results. There you go.
Thanks, Davey. Thanks, Davey. So 41% of you said that manual data entry and errors were your biggest challenge, followed by the lack of integration. Slow approval of job submission processes was 19%, and outdated and inflexible software 15%. That's very interesting based on what we're going to be talking about today. Let's just clear those results and move on to the next slide here. So S Launch has been around for not very long, as Mark mentioned, but it has a serious experience and knowledge skill set behind it. We saw S Launch launched, excludes the pun, at Graphics Canada, and then we saw it again used at the ISA in Vegas. Now, you would have probably seen it in Vegas without realizing if you'd seen the big bobbleheads, the big giant heads that were going around the show. I'm just going to pull Davey back in here. So, Davey, obviously you're on the screen here. There's a lovely picture of you next to what looks like a nice young lady holding your head. Do you want to explain to us real quick how the workflow, how you pulled it together, how it worked, the partners you used, what made it easy?
Yeah, of course. Normally, we were already 2 years in a row. We're doing mini me's at various shows in the US, so we was becoming kind of boring and tedious. So we changed the project, and at ISA we were actually focusing on being able to produce big heads. Now, of course, we needed data to come into our workflow because without data, we're nothing. And that's why we also partnered up with Significance, and together with S Launch, every attendee at the show was able to just scan in a QR code and fill out their data and upload their picture to S Launch. Once they've done that, we received automatically all the information from S Launch, connected it to a photo room that was automatically removing the background. Also, we worked together with Cutout Pro to create the cutout of the big heads, of course, with Pitstop. We created the cut path. Once that has been done, we've done all the impositioning using Griffin. And once we had enough big heads, we sent it over everything to Digitech using the Onyx Connect integration. Everything was sent to the Digitech machine directly from Onyx. But at the same time, also the cut file was sent to the Kongsberg device using the Kongsberg Connect app. Everything ran smoothly. Also, we had people from Kongsberg running around taking pictures of everybody as well during the show, and they never actually had an issue with it. And it was really an example of hands-off automation where we just actually had to take pictures, fill out the form, and it was sent off to production without anybody touching the workflow.
Excellent, Davey. And I think you mentioned a word there that was really important, which was data. Mark's already touched on it a few times. I'm straight away seeing that with S Launch connected into Enfocus Switch using the App Store, that pretty much you can use S Launch with any one of your other apps on your store. Is it as easy as that?
Download it to your Switch installation, add it to your flow, configure the app, and you're up and running.
Excellent. Thanks, Davey. Well, as Davey said, it's all about data, so we're going to jump into some customer data now. We're very, very fortunate to have a fantastic case study. And since using S Launch, this particular customer has seen 90% fewer production errors. Now, if you bear in mind the poll results we had earlier, I think 20% of you said that you have errors with, production. So that straight away would solve that problem. This particular customer also said that they cut their proofing time by 95%. So, straight away, production looks a lot smoother. Sticking with the data theme, throughput increased, orders per day from 150 to 400. Now, I think we'd all admit at this day and age, we'd like to see increased revenue through not necessarily more expenditure and using better software and better systems. If you can increase by that amount of orders, that's really a game changer. And then the other thing as well, which is really interesting here with labor charges these days, they've made $250,000 savings plus annually on labor savings. So that's adding one piece of software to the workflow. They've already increased orders and they're saving on labor. But here's the big one. This is the one that really stood out for me. They went from $1.5 million turnover to 12 million in orders. And that's growing in sales in just by implementing one piece of software. And this particular customer we'll mention later on in a bit more, but this is StickerBeat. Mark, do you want to jump in on anything? Is there anything from a high level that you would like to say on this? Because these are staggering numbers for the first like proper case study, right?
Absolutely. No, they're marvelous numbers, and it's a testament that first of all, StickerBeat's an online business, and it's a testament that everything's moving online and everything needs to be integrated. And they've recognized that early on in their journey that they needed some help, and it came with Enfocus's software and our configuration of workflow to enable more automation in their business. And S-Launch has been the perfect complement to manage the data that's coming through their doors as well.
Fantastic, guys. I mean, bravo to you. And you know, the printer StickerBeat must be thrilled to have those numbers. Okay, so we've seen straight away that the data's good, and that's because the data's being handled correctly. So there's a theme here, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about the data. We're now going to jump into the next poll. I'm going to ask my lovely able assistant. We want to know which of these would have the greatest impact on your business, being fully manual, paper email, semi-automated with spreadsheets or forms, automated with some workflow tools. We don't have a consistent process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's interesting. And automation's up there again. Okay, I'm going to move on. So one of the things that really stood out for me, again, we talked about data, and if we look at this slide here, we can see straight away S-Launch sits at the front of the workflow. It's pretty much a form builder, and it sits there and it does its thing with the form. But let me just share my screen sharing. Let me just make sure that's sharing. There we go. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. But the biggest thing is it's connecting to the data. It's sharing the data in a two-way communication. And that's the power of this piece of integration and software. So we can see on the screen, we've got SAP, we've got spreadsheets, we've got MISs, we've got ERP. And most importantly, and in line with today's session, we've got the Enfocus switch logo there. So we can see really, S-Launch can sit anywhere in front of a data source and it can communicate accordingly. But let's find out why, how, and how all this good stuff happens, how easy it is. Do we need to be technical to use S-Launch? I'm now going to bring in the very esteemed Sean Davis, VP of Technology. Hello, Sean. I understand that you were pretty much the hero of this, or the launch of this product. Do you want to take us through a little bit of the background first? Why? What was the inspiration before we move on to seeing how it looks?
Yeah, for sure. For the most part, the benefit of significance automation is we get to experience a lot of different company cultures, different pain points spread across, especially where we operate, Canada and the US. So one of the biggest pain points that have come up over time is the fact that, you know, there's manual touch points. We're utilizing paperback forms. We're sending out emails. We're receiving things back via email, FTP, WeTransfer, Dropbox, Google Drive, all these varying input mechanisms that, you know, while yes, Switch can interact with those, the big pain point ultimately is how do we make sure that that data is consistent? And so that's largely where S-Launch came to be, at least way back in alpha versions. The main principle was the dynamic form builder. And then from there, it's branched out into a couple other components that we'll certainly talk about today. Obviously, how that interacts with Enfocus Switch as a whole.
Excellent, Sean. I think at this point, let's jump in and see what actually S-Launch looks like and how we can use it.
Great. Let me share my screen. Okay. So yeah, as Mark and Chris had talked about, we have a really good use case with a company called StickerBeat. I'm going to run through our application and the Switch side of things first, and then we can touch on that real world example and how they're utilizing that and how they got to where they are now. So to sort of expand a bit more into what S-Launch is outside of what they've already shown you, yes, it is a dynamic form builder, but I like to typically talk about it more in the extent of it's a submission portal, right? It's very much a sandbox tool. You can create forms to do whatever you want it to do. From there, that data goes into what we call the asset store. And I always relate that to very much like a Google Drive, Dropbox type environment where you can upload files in there, share files out, which we'll briefly touch on as well. And from there, there's a full API behind the scenes. Everything you see through the interface is being controlled by that same API. So when we think about a form being submitted, that data is being pushed into the asset store. And then how do you integrate S-Launch with other applications? There is that API that you can utilize, or which we'll demonstrate today, there is S-Launch Pulse, which is the new app that we pushed on the App Store, which is a direct integration, which allows you to check from the asset store X interval amount of time, find the files in various folders that you're looking for, and to pull those down. And we'll see how that works in this example now. So I'm going to log in. I have my dev environment here. And as you can see, this is very, very, very stripped down. We're looking at this from a basic user perspective. What we're primarily going to focus on is forms, inserting from a form as what a normal user would do, and then see the sort of life cycle of what S-Launch can do / with Switch behind the scenes. And in this particular example, I'm actually going to be demonstrating how we can use this with Griffin. So one big pain point that a lot of people have is in any sort of form builder type tool you utilize, whether it's Google Forms, JotForm, or maybe even from some experiences in the past with the Switch web portal and submit points, the biggest issue is associating different data with different files. So this is one big draw of what we're trying to do with S-Launch, is allow you the capability of creating forms for various inputs, but also allowing you to associate different files with different data. So when one form is submitted, you can have an area for quote documents and appropriately assign these to stipulate their quote documents. You could have an area for just miscellaneous documents as well, art files, or maybe if you're using this as like an order form, which we'll touch on, you could maybe separate out, let's say you're doing book work, you want a specific area for your front cover, back cover, and then you want to have separate upload areas for the actual book contents. It's very much a sandbox, as I mentioned, so anything you can think of, you can largely do within here. So let's jump into the example that I'm going to focus on here. You see I have a webinar imposition example. I'm going to click on this. We can see a preview of what that form looks like on the right-hand side. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scroll down to the form URL. Now, one key element of this application, you can create users, and these users can have access to a subset of forms. So in that way, you could differentiate and say, hey, group A can see these forms, group B can see those forms. What you can also do, let's say you want to create a contact form and link this contact form on your company website. You can enable guest access, and what guest access does is it unlocks it. It doesn't require a login. You can have this form exposed with this URL to anybody you like. But let's jump into this form and we can see what this actually looks like. So from here, you see I have an imposition example. If any of you on this call have utilized Griffin before, a lot of this will be second nature to you. For those that haven't utilized Griffin, it's very much a wide format imposition tool. It allows different strategies to be able to free nest, grid nest, or guillotine cut. And what I've tried to do is mimic those settings of what you can utilize within Switch, but allow you to have a front-end web portal that's outside your environment for security purposes. You don't have to expose your Switch or anything else behind the scenes. Allow you to set up the appropriate fields and set up anything you specifically need, so your board type, role type, and then pass n number of files you would like to impose. And then from there, we'll show you sort of how this feeds into Enfocus Switch and then into Griffin to be imposed. So some of the key elements of slaunch is much like you can within a Switch submit point or in other tools, you can show and hide fields based off different properties, but you can also validate fields based off different properties as well. So for example, if maybe someone entered a file with a specific quantity of over 50, you can maybe show another field, or you could alert the user in a different property that this is not allowed, that this is too big of a quantity for this product type, or whatever that use case is. You can limit that. But in this particular example, let's just step through a couple of the things that we have set up. You'll also notice that you can customize the background color, the style of that input field. So this one is more oval, this one is more squared. You can also customize the color, add some spacers or separators. And as I mentioned, we can show and hide fields. So based off Griffin requirements, if the strategy is guillotine, we can show a first cut example and default this value to a specific number. So in this case, the first cut is either, let Griffin decide. But let's say we're going to leave this as free nesting. We have another drop down for orientation. And then when we get into roles, we can obviously show or hide the min and max cutoff for roles. And maybe I want to say this is a 50 width role with a 1 inch minimum cutoff, or maybe we want to say a 100 max cutoff for this role. And then we decide, actually, let's keep this as a board, and we're going to keep this with a width of 120 and a height of 60. And in this particular case, I've set this up with inches in mind, though you could tailor this to whatever you need. This is just a numerical field in this particular case. Further down in the quantities section, this is the what I want to classify as the meat and potatoes of everything that really makes this stand out in compared to something like a submit point within Switch, is you can incorporate multiple files. So you see down here when I hover over, we have the option to add multiple inputs. So this allows you to select and input multiple files and associate different data. So in my first example, we can say this first file is a quantity of 50. We want our bleed to be, say, 1/8 of an inch, and our spacing for the file to be 1/4 of an inch, our shape handling option. And then with the file upload, we can select a file. And let me pull over. I did have some demo materials. Should have opened
That's
up
what I
here.
prepared earlier.
Oh, you know how it is, Chris. Yeah, so I'll just select a business card file. And as you can see, this is uploading automatically while you're still entering fields. So the benefit of this too, related to our asset store, which we'll touch on, this allows you to enter a large file. Let's say you have a 1 gig file that needs to be uploaded. You can enter that, still continue to enter fields here as it's uploading. When you submit, you now don't have to wait for that 5 minutes for the whole file to upload. It's already been uploaded behind the scenes, and it can now move this forward. I'm going to do the same thing for this second file. I'm going to select, let's select something different here. Let's do a coffee bag that we have front side. I'm going to set this quantity to be 100. We'll set the bleed again, 0.125, spacing of 0.25. And these could be preset as well with default values. I'm going to submit this. We see that this submission was successful. Now, what happens behind the scenes is this is, as I mentioned, going to feed into the asset store. I'll briefly show you what that looks like. And then the slaunch Pulse app running in Switch is going to pick that up. So
Fantastic.
Behind the scenes, I have this very, very simple Switch workflow. Very much what it does is this application, free on the App Store, allows you to pull down any assets that are in the asset store based off your criteria. So we can, and I'll briefly switch over to design. You'll see that we can customize the folder we're monitoring, what file types we're looking for. So in this case, I'm saying only give me zip packages, but this could very well be JPEGs, PDF documents, AI files. You can limit the file types of what you actually want to pull down at that moment. You can also filter on the created and modified dates. And you can also adjust the interval of how often it's going to check. Whereas on our output, we can choose to download the file, automatically set the log or the metadata sidecar file with this. So anything about the properties of that file, the ID inside of slaunch, the created date, the modified date, all that detail can be stored with it. But what you can do as well is rather than having to make another API call, you can, after download, delete the file from the system, so it automatically cleans it up for you, or you could move the file to, let's say, an archive folder. And then in that way, you can think of this as something submitted to the system, it feeds into Switch, it moves that into an archive folder. If you ever needed to action on those files again or briefly keep an archive batch of files, you can do that too. So if I minimize this here, we'll go back to our run side. So as I mentioned, when this comes in, the files will be picked up. We have a package, so we're unarchiving the package, ungrouping those files. We're then picking up those files. We're sending them to be imposed in Griffin, and you can see I've been doing some other tests earlier today. And what will come out on the output is our physical document. So, we actually have our newest one here. Let's open this up. Oh, it looks like my Acrobat is going to be slow today. There we go. Pull this open. So obviously I didn't set the right settings for the type of job I wanted to run here, but it took the varying quantities, it took my two different file types I had here, and it pushed them forward. Now, you could obviously set as many more settings you want to here. You could tailor varying options here for the files. As I mentioned, you could also show and hide fields, validate fields. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out of what a basic user sees and briefly show you the back end of what an admin can control. So now we're an admin. We see we have a couple other options here, but predominantly in this demo, I'm going to focus on the form builder and then briefly talk about the asset store and where these files are saved. In the form section here, we have that same form we looked at, but we have a couple more properties. We can actually edit the form itself. So behind the scenes, how I actually built this form was all drag and drop related. So as you see, I can drag something from the left-hand side, drag it into the canvas in the middle. Anything I click on can be tailored and customized. So if I want to go inside of the imposition settings here, I can click on this first cut. I can change the label if I want to. I can customize the accent color or the label color to be something else. All of this doesn't require any programming, scripting, very much a simple user interface to drag and drop files in here, set up the form the way you want it to be. But for those users that like advanced options, this is where we get into custom action buttons. So if we drag a button in here, for those of you who are a little more tech savvy and likes to do custom scripts, you have the capability of creating a custom script to do whatever you want to do. I'm going to show you StickerBeat in a second, and you'll see how they're utilizing custom action buttons here. The other thing as well is to show and hide fields. There is a little bit of JavaScript and scripting involved there. So we can see we're getting our strategy value. We're checking to see whether or not this is guillotine. If it is guillotine, show that value. For those of you who are maybe not as tech savvy, this is something we are working on in the future to allow a simple user interface to set up rule visibility. But we really went advanced first, and then we'll create a simplified version later. And at any time, I can live preview this form. So anything I've dragged in, I can come here and test it and see whether or not things are working as expected. So in this case, again, just to click back, you see that the first cut section is showing here. But when I preview, the rule takes effect, and that element is now hidden. You cannot see it anymore. So that's
Sean,
a
can I
very
just jump in there real quick, Sean? So
yeah,
just
for
jump in
sure.
real quick. So we've had some questions coming through. So I was just about to ask you a question. Say, do we need to have any front-end developers in-house to do it? You've answered that question. Clearly not. The second question from me, actually, and I'm sorry to be selfish here, guys. I'll get yours in a second. Was that ISA was clearly a very busy trade show. How are you collecting the data? This is a bit of a loaded question because I can see when you're previewing it on a desktop. Could this be on the previous slide you showed other data sources? Could this be used on tablets or phones in other scenarios?
Absolutely, yeah. So let me quickly go back to the actual form, what a user would see. Oops. And I will show you. I will shrink down my screen, and we can very much see what happens if you're working on mobile, working on tablet. So this is HTML5. It's using, for anyone who's very web development tech savvy, this is using flexboxes behind the scenes. So as I scale down the width of this page, you'll see that elements will flow appropriately for the size of your screen. So we see in the file section, as I pared things down, things will adjust appropriately to fill where needed. And
Yeah.
on the form builder element, I briefly, probably you would have seen this on screen, but down here there is a section for your column width. So we can say this one should only be a column of 2, or we want this to be, auto, let it determine itself where it should fit on the page. And then from a traditional, I guess, print perspective, you have your margins and padding. So we can say, I want this padding to be more to the right, and I want some margins at the top to shift this down. You have complete control over all of that.
Great stuff, Sean. So this could be front of house. This could be in a reception area. This could be in a shop potentially as well. Looking by that, I'm just going to jump into some comments real quick. Tim says, so similar to Microsoft Power Apps. I think that's a compliment, or maybe not, whether you're a fan of Microsoft or not, I don't know, but Tim seems to think it's up there with Microsoft. Thank you, Tim. Scott, Joseph, Morton are all sharing that they are Enfocus customers. We're really pleased to see that, and we really feel that this is a partnership that will really bring prosperity. Sean, sorry to interject there. There's just so many questions and great things coming through. You were going to take us through Sticker Beat and the app side of things.
Yeah, I'll just briefly finish up with the asset store side of this application, where that data goes. So I'm sure someone may ask the question if they haven't already, Chris, but does this application store your data? No. What this does is it collects that information. It briefly stores that in the asset store, which we'll touch on now. Once you pull that down into Switch, that is where your data is going to live. So ultimately, this isn't an MIS ERP. Sometimes when we've done demos in the past, people can get a little confused there. But I mentioned this is a submission portal. Think of it very much as a SaaS-driven application. This isn't installed on premise, so you don't have to have an IT company, get an SSL certificate, open up ports, spin up a web server to install this application. It eliminates any of those firewall concerns, those random security related IT attacks that can happen on presses. And we all know probably at this point someone in the past several years has had ransomware attacks and been targeted in some fashion. So predominantly what this is hosted in the cloud. We're utilizing AWS behind the scenes. This is going to connect via that API to any other system you want, or in this particular case, utilizing Enfocus Switch with the Pulse app. All you need is an API key, and the storefront page actually digs into this a bit, but it's a very simple interface for creating API keys and linking that into the app once you have that. In terms of that data, as I mentioned, we have our asset store. We have our imposition request, which is a folder I created, which is where these files are being pushed. And anything that sits within here is what Switch is monitoring, as we briefly saw on this side. We saw we're linking to this folder location in the asset store, and that's where the files are being pulled. But what else can you do with the asset store outside of being an endpoint for these forms? We've had several people actually at Graphics Canada come up to us and recommend some ways they could utilize this component. One was a really good example of a DIE database. So if you have, let's say, hundreds of die templates that your customers are always asking you for, you can upload them here and you can share them out with your clients. The other thing you can do is you can share an entire folder. You can make a folder public. And with that, if I copy this URL and paste this in here, anyone with this public URL can download these files. We don't limit you in any way from pulling these. So it could be a branding marketing folder. You could upload all your public assets there for that. I mentioned the DIE database. Other examples, while Enfocus Review is really great tool for proofing, there could be odd cases where a customer doesn't want to use a proofing solution, but they still want to be able to get that through an electronic fashion. It's too big to send through email. You could upload your proofs here as well, share that link out with somebody, or really any other document, whatever your need is. And then from just an individual sharing perspective, just to go into this public folder to have a real life example, on the Shares tab, we can create a share, much like if anyone's used WeTransfer or something similar. And you can say, hey, send this share to my customer, give them 2 weeks with this expiry date, and set a password and give them up to 5 downloads. So if it's a huge client you have, let's say you're working with Coca-Cola or something, you want to give it to their marketing team, send them a link. They have up to 5 downloads. Here's their specific password you could send them. And then it will automatically invalidate whether this limit has been reached in total downloads or the expiry has elapsed.
Fantastic.
Lastly, for any of these people that are concerned about branding of the application itself, we do have themes. So you can, very similar if you've used it in Enfocus Review, you can theme your interface there. We have a way to change all your primary, secondary colors, your navigation at the top, the logos, all this stuff can be modified with your branding in mind. And yes,
so very good for a B2B environment then, Sean. Very good if you've got multiple customers, keep them sticky. Fantastic. Okay.
Exactly. And lastly, we'll touch on the sticker bead example. Now, before I jump over and show you their form and what they're utilizing here, I'll give you a little bit of background. Some of you may have seen the Enfocus video on StickerBeat. There were several automation endeavors that had happened with them prior to utilizing S-Launch. They have a full encompassing, they have several e-commerce storefronts. Those are 100% driven through Switch behind the scenes. We are creating proofs dynamically, inserting it into their MIS ERP system, moving the files into their production server. All that stuff is hands off. So from the moment someone submits something, those files get fed into their processes and to where they need to go appropriately. What we've done with S-Launch was they came to us back with a problem of, great, we have all our online orders covered, but we have backdoor orders. We have things that come through phone, email. Those are the manual touch points that a CSR has to maintain, but they're still very much, to a certain extent, manually sending the information to the next person in the chain. What they wanted to do was make sure the backdoor orders followed the exact same procedures as the online orders. So as you saw with Switch, when the form is submitted, we are picking up the data on the back end and feeding that data directly into the same set of workflows we built for their online orders. So everything is parity. There's no difference between those two operations. And what that form looks like is this. So the CSRs will get a call or will receive an email with the customer's details. And what they'll do is, whether it's a new CSR, a veteran CSR or coordinator of that company, they don't really need to worry or forget about what questions to ask based off product type or based off the type of order that they need or want. They can just follow the steps of what's inside this form. So in this particular case, because this is a web-based form, autofill is a thing. So your browser, in this case, Google Chrome, will automatically pick up if I've entered details previously. A couple other form fields that we haven't really demonstrated. Well, we did demonstrate a dropdown, but I mentioned the custom JavaScript actions. So stereotypically, in most e-commerce environments, you have a build to equal ship to checkbox type functionality. This does the same thing. Since this is pre-filled on the left, I can click this button and the details automatically copy over to the right-hand side. So when you're building your own form, this could be maybe even a brief calculation to estimate a total value for a sales rep. So if you add, 5 different products with different product types and materials and whatnot, you can have a rough calculation that calculates into a value, and then that sales rep could adjust that if need be before submitting the quote into the business while they're out and about. We mentioned showing and hiding fields as well. So in this particular case, if the shipping required shipping based off the client's account and they needed to enter that client's UPS number, we could only make that field required based off the previous dropdown that was specified. I mentioned there's a specific area for other file types. So customer PO file, that is separate from other art files that are submitted, and we know exactly what file is going to be for that need. But the main principle here that we want to focus on, and a good use case that allows you to upload multiple files related to different metadata, is their items or their cart section of this form. So it looks like we only have one field here, one product, but we have those visibility rules behind the scenes that only show fields based off a specific product type. So if I select die cut stickers, now we see, hey, size has shown up, quantity showed up. The CSR, again, doesn't need to know what product type needs what field. They just need to look at the fields that show up, the ones that are required, and enter them appropriately. So with die cut stickers, they know this is going to be, a 2x2 inch sticker. Quantity maybe is 500. This is also a numerical field, so they're not allowed to enter any alpha characters. Drop down for the finish, and then we have an area to upload.
But Sean, can I just jump in real quick, Sean?
Yeah,
we had a question actually on upload actually come in from Morton. He's asking, and I saw the upload field, so I'm sorry to interject, and I'm sorry if this should be saved for the Q&A, but I think there's so many good things you're showing here. He asks, can we submit a .csv file through the upload section?
Yes, absolutely. So any files that you submit, and I'll just come in here just to show you, you can limit the total file size of what that file upload allows. You can also customize and say this particular area is only for CSVs or only for PDF documents or whatever you want. Fantastic. So you have the capability to really limit what certain file uploads are going to do.
Okay. Morton, I hope that answers your question. I think there's so many things here, Sean, and I just wanted to say that, and I'll come on to the Pulse app in a second because that's another question I've got as well. But you said about the reducing the touch points, and you mentioned those really, I won't say annoying, but sometimes time-consuming orders that come through phone, email, text messages, and things. Reading between the lines here, this makes everything consistent. It gives the same process and flow for all data into the PSP's workflow. I'm assuming here that that's why those numbers were so good with StickerBeat, because actually you reduced a lot of those manual interventions and you forced it through this channel. Would I be right in assuming that?
Yeah, absolutely. Another big focal point that I don't even think you know this, Chris. We do have a save and a load up here at the top. So that was one big thing that StickerBeat came back to us on, was we would love the capability. Sometimes you'll get an order and you filled out half the information, but you're not exactly ready to submit yet. So because again, we're not storing in information here at this time with what SLaunch does, we have a save button, which downloads a temporary file to your downloads area, which has all that data in it. When you're ready, let's say a week goes by and the customer gives you more information, then you can come back, click the load button, find where you had that download JSON. So in this case, let me do a save. I'm going to reload this. Everything's cleared. I'm going to go to load, go to my download section, select this draft here, and everything is populated.
Fantastic. Okay, I've got a couple more, Sean, and then we're going to have to move on because if people want to see more, we're going to share details in a minute how they can book your time and see a bit more of this amazing application. So Joseph has asked here, he says, can these forms be filled out and or created by switch data? Example would be CSR creates job in MIS and triggers switch to tell S-Launch to create this job and send the invitation to the customer via email.
That's a good question. That is something in the future. We've talked about, obviously, this is very much a submission, a kickoff point for something, but we've talked about essentially tasks. Very similar, I guess, when we think about the web portal with Switch. We have that capability right now, but we're working on, let's say, checkpoints, where you could send out a request for some sort of interaction, some sort of data request to fill out new information, and then submit that through the same operation. Yeah.
Okay, so we call that the Joseph module, Joey, because of that question. Thank you, Joseph. I think the other thing as well, I just wanted to highlight before we move on, and again, I'm seeing another question here. I assume loads can be customized, directed to specific locations. I mean, guys, if we can't answer all these questions now, we will come back to you and we'll follow up with an email. One of the team will. There's some really good questions here. I think what you can all see as well is that it sounds very simple when you say web form, but actually what it does is it simplifies things. It creates brand security, enables people to interact with brands, enables people to work with multiple brands. There's just so many ways data can flow, but the key thing is that data is accurate. Sean, is there any final point you can leave us with before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, absolutely. I pretty much showed everything I wanted to show at a high level here. I did mention the API, and so where I'll leave everyone here is just with the documentation. So you don't and I'm sure Mark will get into this here, but from a pricing sort of side of things, the API is not extra here. It all comes with the core application. So everything you saw me do through the interface is something you could utilize through the API on the back end. And so, for example, we've had a couple people ask, hey, I want to dynamically update the drop-down options in a form as maybe the product types change or whatever that may be. You can do that through the API. So you can get the form structure out of the API, find that particular field in there that you want to adjust. Of course, this is JSON. And then you can make a call back to the API with that new JSON payload, update those fields. And then if a user's on that form and they refresh the page, they immediately see those new values. So you can dynamically update the form without the interface if you need to.
Bravo. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Mark, did you want to jump in on that free API piece? Because that to me seems to be a nice touch.
Well, it is a really nice touch, and it's at our core to provide as much integration capabilities as possible, whether it's to the end users or to our fellow integrators here online today.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. I think there's an abundance of information, but also questions as well. So I really urge you guys, if you want to find out more, the next slide, we're going to share a QR code. I'm just going to take over, Sean. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, right. So if you want to find out more from what Sean was sharing today, the QR code on the left-hand side will take you to a page where you can register, and the guys can come back to you and give you more of a tailored demonstration. Real fantastic, broad, I should say, really as well. It really can be anything you want it to be, can't it? The way it can be configured. And also, one of the strengths for Significance, something they're very good at, is looking at your workflow from the helicopter view and really advising you the right way on how to get real ROI on your software stack. So the QR code on the right-hand side, give that a little scan as well and download one of the free white papers, 6 Pillars of Workflow Automation ebook by Significance Automation. I'll leave that up for a few seconds. Okay, so like we said, summarize a little bit now. Sean's covered a hell of a lot of stuff there, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure we all want to lose those manual touch points. So again, and those numbers that we're just going to reconfirm those numbers again for you. It's time for a change, and that's what S-Launch does. It brings you a different way of getting data and getting data the right way. So let's just go over the benefits again. We're mobile ready. We can work on the tablets. We can work on the mobile phones. We saw that at ISA. We saw that at Graphics Canada. We all know the trade show is a busy, chaotic environment. So if it works there, it pretty much should work anywhere, right? So modern infrastructure. Sean mentioned things like AWS, integrating with MIS, integrating with the App Store. These are all the things that are key for a successful workflow. API first, API free, I say. Mark mentioned that earlier, the API set is going to be free as well. Simple and intuitive. My question to Sean was going to be, do I need to understand HTML? Do I need to be a front-end developer? He answered that without even moving his lips. He just moved his mouse. The answer is no, by the way. It's fully customizable as well. We had the question about upload types. We can change literally anything we want, even the colors and the branding. And it's workflow enabled. And I think in a minute we might get a sneak peek maybe of the app if we can squeeze it in. And also it's hosted. It's a SaaS solution. It's affordable. And if you want to find out more about the pricing model, again, scan the QR code that's going to come up in a second and speak to the team. Just going to move on. There we go. And our fellow there is dancing because he's now realizing those numbers that we saw for Sticker Beat. Okay, so let's go back over the case study again. So we spoke about Sticker Beat. Let's just go over the numbers that matter. So 90% fewer production errors. Proofing was cut by 95%. And throughput increased from 150 to 400 orders per day. And then another big one we mentioned earlier, $250,000 in annual labor savings, or probably more actually, it's a plus. And then the big one, the really big one that matters, and it's the money in the bank, 1.5 million bucks to 12. It was 12 million actually. It grew in sales. I mean, I would have taken 7 million, but 12 million is even better, right? So 1.5 million increased to $12 million. That's how much the sales grew by adding one piece of software and some consultancy into a workflow. And as Sean said earlier, and as Marcus said many times, it's about getting the data the right way. It's about making the process consistent, whether you're putting things through an email or you're going through like a web portal. So bravo, chaps. That was fantastic. I'm just going to check if Davey's still awake now. He is my able assistant. I have given that away. Davey, can we just do another poll, please? I'd also like to thank the guys like Jimmy and Tim and Joseph and Morton who have been really active today in the chat. I can see some people that are really into their software and really get what we're trying to achieve here. So which of these would you think would have the greatest impact on your business? Faster turnaround times, fewer production errors, better visibility across your team, or easier customer job intake? Now, this is a bit of a trick question. And actually, there's a bit of a trend here. The first person that can put in the chat what the trend is gets a prize. Joseph wins. Oh no, Scott wins. Sorry, Joseph. It's data entry. But technically, Joseph's right with job intake. Excuse me. The speed of your answer caught me by surprise. Okay, Scott, we'll have to come up with a prize. I don't know what it is because I just made that up on the fly. So I'll let you know. Don't get too excited. Okay, so here's the best bit. We're going to go into a Q&A now. You guys have been brilliant today. What we'd like to, well, actually, I've got a few questions that have already come through. I'm going to start off bringing Mark in if I can. Let's close the poll down. There we go. And I'm going to leave you guys all on the screen. Davey as well, I'd like you to come in as well for this if you can. And if people in the chat want to put questions into Davey as well, that'd be fantastic. So Mark, I'm going to start. I've got a question for you. You've shown us S launch in action within the print environment. Okay, so we discussed ISA, we discussed Graphics Canada. These are great shows and great use cases. But if any business, and the reason I asked this question as well is earlier on in the deck we saw other data sources other than Enfocus Switch. If any business is trying to streamline operation, would this work in that scenario? And I'm sorry, David, to take it slightly away from Switch. I know we're here to talk about Switch today, but would it work in another scenario or industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, any software we build helps to, well, will go beyond our industry. We want to connect the dots between our PSPs and the brands out there, and we want the brands to feel like our software has an ability to have a better communication link with our industry. So yeah, we try and transcend industry. We try and transcend applications. We've shown this off to the medical group, and they've been really, really interested in using our forms for intake, for instance. We've shown it out to suppliers that are in the installation business, and they would like to use this form in installations. Now, will all those applications connect the dots with Enfocus? No, unfortunately not. But this is the ability to obviously transcend the industry.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Sean, I had another one for you, but I think you've answered this. I'm going to go through it anyway, just to reiterate the point. Sean, can you explain how automated workflows are set up within S-Launch and how much customization is possible? Excuse me.
Yeah. So with the S-Launch Pulse app, it's very much a data input component. Again, anything that's submitted to the form, that's a very simple way to get it within your switch workflows and then do something with it. Outside of that, we are working on another app for S-Launch, which will be focused on the other elements of interacting with that asset store. So we showed sharing through the interface briefly on how to do that. Behind the scenes, right now, you can utilize that API as I mentioned, but we'll make a better, easier, simple way to be able to action on that within Switch. So same principle with talking about that task elements. As we add more components in the future, we'll have more apps to integrate with S-Launch, but we'll also have more options like, let's say, for example, tasks. You can create a task inside the system, share out that request with somebody, wait for them to fill something out, and then that feeds back in via the Pulse app or any other tools we have to configure that, really. So I'm trying to aim, because I'm the one who typically builds the apps for the App Store. I'm
Yeah,
trying to eliminate the need for any complex scripting. I'm really trying to make this simple. And I am aware, as I've spoken with Davey in the past, not everyone has the metadata module as well. And Davey, that's a reminder. I would love a feature to flag apps for that. But yeah, so we're if
Sean,
anyone
I think
has,
that's a great. Yeah, it's a great
yeah,
segue actually into Davey actually, and what it's like from his perspective, connecting with you. So we've been talking about getting the data and then piling it into Switch. Davey, I mean, what's it like from your point of view? How do you see the Pulse app and the way the configuration's gone and the way the data flows? Because obviously you've seen 2 events now with it working live, plus everything else. What's your take on this?
Well, certainly, for example, and certainly if there's an integration with Enfocus Switch, it needs to be easy to be set up, fast to integrate, up and running in no time. So you actually can have a return on your investment in a couple of hours instead of a couple of weeks or months. So that is also what S-Launch does through the integration with Switch with the app. Also, for example, with every app on our app store, it allows Switch users to integrate with third-party systems fast, easy, and cheap in the end. That being said as well, if you look at ads launch, also on a user perspective, if you are a CSR, you don't want to hassle. You don't want to hassle of following a whole procedure, for example, to be able to this. And then if you want to do that, you have to go to that website and then you have to do this and then you have to delay. No, it has to be simple, straightforward. And that is also what this form environment does. You can customize it to your own processes, to your own company, where CSRs are comfortable using it. And that is the most important message here as well. User friendly on both levels to actually implement it, but also to use it.
I love that, Davey. And while we're staying with you, buddy, I've been asked here, what does unidirectional connect mean? So I don't know whether someone's seen that, but what does it mean and how does it help businesses keep their systems lightweight yet functional? Do you want to explain that for us?
Unidirectional or unidirectional?
Sorry, my bad, unidirectional.
Unidirectional means that data flows only in one way. So that means also that you do not have any feedback from a third-party system. So you don't need to know what the status is. If data only flows one way, it's only pushing data, and here you have it, do whatever that you want with it, and I don't care anymore. Bidirectional communication means, for example, that you also get statuses back, that you can feedback, and that is also what CSR need in the end. If you launch something in the production, instead of actually asking 15 people in production where we are with this job, did we already receive the files, yes or no, whether it has been approved, yes or no, that we get feedback from our system as well, from our jobs, that we know at every time of the day what is the status of my jobs where I'm responsible for. Not only to the
Fantastic.
CSR, also to the customer.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, what we're saying here, and I'm talking to you now, so getting it from a perspective of Enfocus, is this S
Mhm.
launch really helps the customer and the PSP in many
Mhm.
ways. It makes everyone's
Exactly.
life easier, right? Kills frustration. Okay, we've got a few more questions coming through the chat, and I know Sean's doing a great job trying to answer them all, so I'm going to try and help out a bit here. Tim says, I assume the load can be customized to be directed to a specific location. Who wants to answer that one?
Yeah, so load in terms of if we're talking about where each one of those forms and that data goes, in the current environment, largely you're going to specify where it drops in the asset store. So let's say you have a contact form, you could create a contact submissions area inside the asset store. If you have an order submission area, you could separate those out so you can divert them into chunked areas. In the future, the which we didn't touch on today, but we could certainly touch on in following sort of regroups and calls. We have a task chains component, which is our minified workflow engine behind the scenes, which allows us to move and action on data within in the system. So it's our workflow engine all around S Launch itself, and it's the main driving force of everything within S Launch.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I had a question here which I think I can answer. How have companies like StickerBeat leveraged S Launch in their operations, and can you share measurable outcomes? Well, I think the answer is quite easy. We've shared the numbers today. If they want more information on the case study, Mark, they should probably get in touch with you, right? And you can share more of the detail on that.
Yep.
Yeah, Mark, staying with you. Another question here. For teams with limited IT resources, how easy is it to deploy and update S Launch? What kind of support or onboarding is available? That's a good one. That's a juicy one. That's a meat and the veg. Is it meat and veg was the saying you use, Sean, or meat and potatoes?
Yeah.
Well, let Sean answer it because he's got the live experience with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did mention it is hosted AWS. So it is a SaaS-based application. It's in the cloud. Any updates that we have, that stuff will be pushed appropriately. Well, let's say there's a bug that needs to be addressed or whatever that is. We're looking to have
Yeah.
monthly patches, let's say. So don't consider this application like major versions that come out once a year. You don't have to patch anything. You don't have to install anything. We do everything behind the scenes. Everyone is parity on the same version. It makes sure that it simplifies you not needing an IT company, not needing again to have SSL certificates or ports opened. All this stuff is managed for you.
Excellent. That's a great response. Mark, I'm going to come back to you. You're not going to get away without answering at least one question from me. Looking ahead, and as you're well, apparently, looking ahead, what's on the roadmap for S Launch? Are there any upcoming enhancements or integrations planned or anything else that potentially, because Sean gave a hint today of something that I hadn't seen. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
There are continual developments, and unfortunately, we can't share them all publicly yet. But we are going to continually bring in a perfect handshake with Davies App Store. So I'll leave that hint, and we do have a presentation that we've scheduled for late September to demonstrate something really, really unique that we're doing for the App Store, and specifically around Switch and S Launch. So that's what I'm going to leave as a short-term opportunity to visit us and continue to stay in touch with us while we have our users continue getting their updates that we're sending on a monthly basis.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. On that bombshell from Mark, We look forward to updating you on what that revelation will be. We are well over time now, so I'm going to start to sort of move things on a little bit. 2 QR codes on the screen once again. If you want to see this in more detail, or we want to talk to the guys about it, ask them any questions, then please use the left QR code. And if you want to find out more information on how you can automate your workflow better, more efficiently, use the right hand QR code. Okay, so thank you for everybody who's been in the chat today. Thank you so much for all the questions. We will go through them. We will come back to you. There will be a recording. We will send it out. We also have to say thank you to Davey and the guys at Enfocus, who obviously enable us to create these additional revenues and return on investments, because without our partners, we wouldn't be able to achieve this. Keep the questions coming. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'd like to thank Sean for his information and his detailed demonstrations today. And I think that's it. Just leaves me to say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you,
Gentlemen, do you have
everybody.
anything do you want to close off at all, Davey or Mark? Anything you'd like to add?
I'll leave it to Mark and Scott first.
Go ahead, Davey.
I just want to mention also we have another Workspace Enfocus Switch webinar upcoming next week as well. Next Wednesday, same time with the Meadows Publishing. You're also free to follow the next webinar as well. See you there, maybe.
Welcome that.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Davey. We'll end it there.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Next time.
Thank you.
Big thanks.